Hello, welcome to Property with a View. It's a series of podcasts by the Digital Property Market Steering Group, talking to leaders from across the property market about how technology is hopefully changing the market so that it becomes more efficient and easier, particularly to buy and sell property. I'm Mike Harlow, and today I'm talking with Sammy Pahal. Sammy is the Managing Director of the UK PropTech Association, which has recently merged with the British Property Federation. Sammy has a lot of experience in the property market, having also worked with the Ordnance Survey, and I'm very glad she's joined us today because I'm very interested to find out how PropTech is developing, what really PropTech is, and the impact she thinks that PropTech is going to have on the way the property market works in the near future. Sammy, thank you very much for coming. Firstly, can I just ask you to introduce yourself, give us a bit of background so that we know who you are, and then talk about the association and this new relationship it's got with the British Property Federation. What's that all about?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks, Mike, and really pleased to be joining you on the podcast today. So I joined UK PropTech Association when it first formed about 6 years ago. At that particular time, the PropTech industry was just sort of getting off the ground. It was a fairly new term, but PropTech had been around for quite a long time, starting with the likes of sort of Rightmove and Zoopla, if you like. I know we're going to come on to what PropTech is, but I guess they are the original PropTechs. Before I joined UK PropTech Association, I worked for Ordnance Survey, so I actually had an understanding of, I suppose, how data was being used in the land and property sector, and was managing the relationships with some of the technology companies in that particular space that, again, I suppose were considered PropTechs, but at that particular time, I wasn't aware of that. So I was sort of liaising with these companies and looking at how they were starting to use technology and data in a different way. And my background is actually not in tech or in real estate. My background is in psychology. So I joined Ordnance Survey quite by chance, I suppose, and sort of started my career there and have ended up working in PropTech and learning more about what technology is and how it applies to the property industry across those 6 years. So it's been quite a steep learning curve, I have to say, but very enjoyable to see where the industry is going. And when we first started UKPA, it really was to educate. So in addition to me learning about what the industry was doing, we were also trying to educate property companies on how technology was evolving and what it could mean for the industry across all parts of the built environment. So from design and construction to sales and leasing to property management to property investing. There was a lot to do in those 6 years, and we're still very much focused on education. But now I think the industry has got to the point where it has matured enough for people to understand it is critical to addressing some really important challenges that the industry is facing. And there's much more willingness now to look at how they can bring technology into their businesses, which is why we have formed the merger with the British Property Federation, because we not only feel that the industry has matured enough for this to happen at the right time, but also it's about engaging a wider audience. So not just the sort of heads of innovation or directors of innovation that are responsible for looking at PropTech, but also people that are in senior management positions or in very much core real estate roles and could be using technology. So it's been quite a journey, and I suppose this is the next chapter now, being part of BPF.
It has the sense of PropTech just being not a separate thing being done kind of over there, but actually being an inherent part of how you manage commercial property, which is obviously what the British Property Federation is about. So does it mean that the UK PropTech Association brand is going to get absorbed, or is that still going to be separate?
And no, at the moment it is still going to be separate. We have built up our brand over the 6 years, and I think there's a recognition that that the brand is strong, and we want to keep that. We want to create a place for PropTechs to come together and be part of a community. So there's lots that PropTechs can learn from each other, as well as learning and engaging with the real estate side as well. So whilst we have that separate brand, and there's definitely room for the PropTech community to be a community in its own right, you're absolutely right. It now needs to be embedded into the property industry, and I suppose fully integrated and thought of as not a separate thing, but central to the strategy of different businesses. So that's really what we're trying to do now, is get that message across and bridge the gap between our two networks.
And the association has just joined 2 cross-sector boards. The first is you've joined the Digital Property Market Steering Group, and you've also joined the PropTech Steering Board, which the Department for Levelling Up has initiated. There's a lot of coming together at the moment. Just tell us a bit about why you've joined as an association, why you've joined those 2 entities, and also what do you think these groups and boards signifies? Because it's a degree of kind of coordination and alignment that I don't think we've seen before.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting that the government has created these groups and is looking to bring different industry players together. It's something that I think has been needed for quite a long time, and we have always had a relationship with government to support their understanding of what the PropTech industry can do, and invited them along to various events where we've looked at how PropTech can help with tackling the affordability crisis or the shortage of housing, digitising the planning sector, and of course the home buying and selling process as well. So there's always, I think in recent years at least, been a recognition that PropTech can help with some very critical national challenges. But I think it's about finding the government finding its feet about what role they should play in supporting the industry to grow and to thrive. And I think they're now seeing that actually, particularly with the UK PropTech Steering Board, they can create a really thriving PropTech industry similar to what we've seen in fintech. So it's exciting that they really want to get behind that, and they've brought together not just myself and Melanie Leach, CEO of BPF, but also some of the VCs who are investing into PropTechs. They've also funded local authorities to bring in technology as well with the PropTech Innovation Fund. So I think there's some real interesting initiatives happening now, and some real action that's being taken. So the reason why I've joined is really to support that understanding even further, so government can understand exactly what PropTechs are doing in those spaces that they're interested in, but also that PropTechs can have a voice back to government as well. I think there's been sort of ad hoc roundtable events here and there. But what's exciting now about this group is it will be, an ongoing group of people acting as representatives of the industry and feeding back to PropTechs as well. So it will be ongoing, and we can actually create a program of work to create that thriving PropTech industry that we all want to see.
Okay, so let's we'll come back to what we think those entities should do, what that program of work should be.
Yeah.
But let's start with helping people understand where we're at today, because we all know that technology is phenomenal. The change that it's brought in our lifetime has been amazing, and some things have plateaued. Mobile phone technology has gone through an amazing transformation in the last 30 years, but is probably plateauing. and some things are just in the foothills, right? Like so artificial intelligence, etc. So the thing that strikes me, you mentioned fintech. The thing that strikes me when you look at different industries is how the technology has had has developed symmetrically. So the ability to process information between computers and mobile phones has developed as a technology on a level that the sectors have not developed on a level. So the financial sector is way ahead, I would suggest, in terms of the digitization and connectivity of systems and the ability to do everything digitally, way ahead of the property market. So what is the state of property technology? Where is it succeeding? And what could property technology do for the market? And why hasn't it happened yet?
Yeah, all very, very good questions. And I'll try and answer that as best as I can. I suppose just firstly, looking at fintech and why there's been, the uptake that we've seen in that particular industry. I think the real estate industry is quite unique in terms of the complexity of it and in terms of the number of different stakeholders involved in any one process, particularly when it comes to the buying and selling process, but also in terms of property management as well. You have different property companies involved or different stakeholders involved, and they all have to buy into the technology at the same time. And it's quite difficult to get that to happen, but also it's difficult to understand or agree who actually is responsible for investing in the PropTech solution as well. Who should be paying for it? So I think that's still up for debate, and I don't think we've quite cracked that nut just yet. Whereas I think in the fintech industry, in banking and finance, that's very different. You have fewer players, you have fewer stakeholders, but also the number of tech companies in that space are much fewer as well. I think prop tech is a huge industry across the globe, but in the UK we have just less than 1,000 companies. So we don't have those kind of market leaders just yet, compared to what you see in the banking world, where you may have the fintech disruptive banks that we all know, like Monzo, Revolut, etc. So you have fewer players. It's easier to understand. I think one of the things that holds back the adoption of PropTech is that there are so many different companies, and it can be quite difficult to navigate what each of them do and who you should be working with. And it's not easy to say this PropTech company over here is better than this one over here, because it is very much dependent on each business's needs and how they're set up as well. So there are not those kind of clear winners. And by the very nature of the built environment, and as I mentioned, the different stakeholders, the different processes, etc., it can often be more than one PropTech company that you need to manage a property or to create the experience that you want in the property itself.
Yeah. There's quite a few points I'd like to pick up there, because I think the number of parties involved that you suggested, which kind of rings true with me, is a barrier. Because they, as you say, they all need to buy in. Otherwise, if somebody could have a really whizzy system and have been, invested heavily in something, but if the people they're trying to deal with don't, then they can't use it, right? They have to kind of get their paper and pen out again. So how do you, and of course you then got the people not knowing what to buy in order to know whether they can necessarily, when they need to work with another lawyer or another surveyor or whatever, know whether their systems are going to connect up. So what is it that we can do as a steering group, as a government, to make that happen more quickly, to create this the operating environment in which that just happens more easily?
Well, I suppose I think I would look at it slightly differently. And I think it's difficult to force people to use one particular PropTech solution for the reasons I mentioned. Everybody has different business setups, different business requirements, and often one tool can also be used for multiple different parts of the business as well. So I think it's pushing against a wall if you are trying to say everybody use this particular solution, or for this particular transaction, for example, we want you to use this system. I think we should be looking at it differently, in the sense that if PropTechs can integrate better and we can create a data flow, it shouldn't matter what system you're using, as long as your system that you're using works with another system that, for example, in the transaction process, if a conveyancer is using a different system to an agent or to the buyer and seller, then that should be absolutely fine, as long as the data can flow between those systems and they can talk to each other. So I think government can play a role in helping to create those standards around that.
So can you give me an example then of where in another sector or another part of the world where they have created or are working to those sorts of data standards and connectivity standards, where you've got a standard plug and a standard socket, if you like, so that the industry, people in the industry, can buy a different piece of software that suits them, knowing that they can then plug into the other law firm, the other surveying firm, bank, whatever it is. Just where does it work, and what is it that they did to make it work?
I'm not sure that anybody has actually got that 100% right just yet. I think PropTech is a fairly new industry, and the UK is probably quite unique in the fact that there are so many different PropTech companies. As I mentioned, we probably have the biggest geography when it comes to PropTech. So I don't think therefore the challenge is as big in relation to PropTechs not integrating together in other jurisdictions than compared to to what it is in the UK.
Right.
So I suppose the challenge is not as great in other countries, but also I think no one has quite got it right just yet. I think this is I suppose the PropTech industry to an extent will consolidate. So we will start to see more businesses coming together anyway. We will start to see more acquisitions. We will start to see more mergers. And we will start to see some companies not surviving through the current sort of economic climate as well. So I think naturally the number of PropTechs will reduce, but of course we will still always, given the nature of the property industry, require that integration to be smoother. I think on the flip side, what we hear from PropTechs who are being asked to integrate is that the problems that they're trying to solve are not very clearly defined. So they can look at integrating. It costs them money. So if they're investing in that, they need to understand exactly what problem they're solving, and why they should be doing that, and whether it's something that is going to be scalable. So I think that's very different to the way that property companies think about things.
So if there was a common language, a common data standard, and a common sort of plug and socket, so that the software systems could connect in, that would make it better, right? So if overnight we clicked our fingers and we had the equivalent of HTML, which makes the internet work, wherever in the world you are, you can speak to the rest of the world in HTML. If we had that would enable going back to your suggestion that one of the principal problems is that there are lots of parties and they come together in a rather random order, depending on how the transaction or the relationships are formed. If there was that standard data and standard connectivity, that would make the market adopt and use technology sooner? Is that fair to say?
So I suppose I don't think the challenge is necessarily creating those standards. I think it will be in getting people to adopt those
Yep.
standards. So whilst the benefits are there and people would welcome
Yeah.
it, most companies would welcome it, I think they then would have to look at retrospectively how they're storing data, how they're labeling different data sets or different data points. And that in itself is a large piece of work to do. So I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
in principle, everybody is on board with the concept,
Yeah.
but in practice it's quite difficult to implement, which is why I think it's not happened yet. And
Yeah.
everybody has started to create their own data standards within their own businesses, because
Yeah.
particularly in the commercial property world, there's not even, I think, common data standards within one business.
Yeah.
Everybody will store data in a complete different way. So
Yeah.
it's such a massive challenge
Yeah.
that we're asking them to change things without much, I guess, funding or resource or investment.
Yeah. But it's not going to get any better unless we do. I think is what I'm getting is that unless we do have a common data standard and common connectivity in the future, we are going to be left with a problem of a lack of ability for systems to talk to each other, which is just going to impair people's willingness to adopt technology and impair the effectiveness of that technology. So we do need to kind of broach that. Well, yeah, take on that challenge, create the standard, and then deal, as you say, with probably quite a tough road in terms of getting people to spend the time and the money in changing their data and the way their systems work to adopt it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the attitudes, if you like, of the industry to the adoption of PropTech. I always think of the property market as a fairly traditional, quite conservative market, I guess, in terms of its adoption of change. Do you think there is still a lack of understanding of the potential and the benefits of technology? Worries about the risks it might pose? What's the sort of human behavioural side of this that we need to talk about?
Yeah, so I think it's a spectrum. I would say, there are some companies who have hired directors of innovation or innovation teams who are very much brought into the idea and potential of PropTech and can recognize the benefits that it brings to their business. But even within those organizations, there is still work to be done to actually create a successful implementation of the tech solutions that they're bringing in. So I think you've got, on one hand, the initial willingness has to be there, absolutely. And, those that have directors of innovation, as I mentioned, are demonstrating that they do have that willingness. Others, I think, are, very early stage in their journey of exploring PropTech and may not have the resources or the funds to have someone dedicated to PropTech, which means it's then someone doing it in addition to their day job. So the level of investment into PropTech and exploring how it can impact businesses is different depending on how big the organization is, depending on which part of the industry they're in. For example, in the commercial property industry, I would say you do tend to have people responsible for tech and innovation. In the residential side, less so. But that doesn't mean that there's fewer opportunities in the residential side, absolutely not. But in terms of the implementation of tech, that's where I think we start to actually see some real challenges when it comes to human behavior. I think, a company can have the best intentions for bringing in technology. They can have a fully thought out digital transformation strategy across the business. They can resource that. They can bring people in. They can bring the experts in. As soon as you start to get people to do things differently, you start to see some barriers, because with the best will in the world, people do not like to change. There's still it's human behavior that we like to continue with our habits. We find it difficult to change things unless we know exactly what we need to do to bring that change in. And I take it back to, it's a simple analogy, but when we set New Year's resolutions, we say, oh, we're going to be going to the gym 3 times a week. But until you actually start to make a plan to say, well, if I am going to the gym 3 times a week, it means I need to get up at this time, which means I need to go to bed by 9 p.m., which means I need to eat by 7 p.m., etc. So you actually have to go to that level of detail to think about exactly what the steps are that you need to take to make a change. Humans find it difficult. So, you actually need to have people responsible for change management coming in. And I think that's where we're lacking as an industry. We don't always have those experts that understand human behavior. They just sort of think, well, everybody seems to be bought into it. They understand the value. It will be fine. But it's not as simple as that.
I just suspect there may be people listening who think, well, actually, one of the things I'd question is the value. Because a lot of the time, we've in our careers experienced technology being brought in and thought, well, I'm just doing it a different way, and I'm not sure it's any better as a result of the technology. So how would you, in general terms, looking at the whole of the way the property market works, how would you say, if somebody said, what is the point of PropTech? What does it actually, what difference is it going to make? What's the simple way you sum it up for people?
I think it comes down to the problems that they're trying to solve. I think the challenge around value or perceived value comes when you're looking at tech as a nice to have and you haven't quite matched that up with a problem that you're facing in the business. And we hear this all the time, that property companies will say a prop tech is pitched to them, but they haven't really, they've told them they've got a problem, but they don't think that they do have a problem. And that in itself is another sort of challenge which we don't need to get into right now in terms of how PropTechs pitch their products and solutions. But I think you have to start with what the problem is and what the business objectives are and how you're going to get there. I think only then you can actually look at, well, can technology really add value, and where does it add the most value? Because I think unless you articulate that and understand that properly, you won't see the value. So and I think you also have to understand what your key metrics are as well.
So just can you give me an example, a simple example where you think it's pretty unarguable that there is a relatively standard problem for which technology clearly adds value?
So I would say if we look at the buying and selling process, I think is inarguable that PropTech can play a key role and can add value. I myself bought my first flat about 3 years ago, and it took me 6 months. It was a new build flat, so there was no chain. It should have been quite a quick process, so I thought. But at that particular time, it was just after Grenfell, and so they had brought in new safety measures and a new EWS1 form that was required to be completed by the property owner. And the mortgage lender had a very different view of what information was required versus the property owner. So whilst that is not that's, I guess, quite an unusual challenge, which everybody is sort of still grappling with at that particular time, the communication between the different stakeholders was so slow. So whilst you may have different views of the property and different views of what information is required, that's understandable. It was a new sort of form that had been brought in. The delay in the communication is something that was really unnecessary, and it actually meant that in the end I had to go with a different mortgage lender. The conveyancer that I used had a really sort of slick PropTech tool, which really was helpful to keep me as a first-time buyer informed of what was happening in the process. But that was not that was not being sort of used by any of the other stakeholders. I don't think that the property owner or the conveyancer, or sorry, the mortgage lender was using any sort of tech solution. And so I think if they had all been using something to communicate better, we could have really saved at least 2 or 3 months. And we're seeing that already in the property industry with the buying and selling process. We're seeing companies like Conveo or Koju really speeding up the process just by everybody talking better together and having that transparency over who's doing what and what's causing the delays. So I think that's, it's a no-brainer really in that particular part of the process.
Yeah. So if you had, I'm sort of piecing this together, I mean, and particularly from a sort of transaction point of view rather than the kind of building management point of view or portfolio management point of view, but if you had, even though we might be using different software because law firm A has come together with law firm B in a random way because we've been chosen by our clients, not that we didn't choose each other. So if our systems were able to connect up and they were able to share information on the property, the parties, the terms of the deal, the progress, etc., then it is an essential, it's an important information flow, and it's a high risk and high value information flow, but it is an information flow is what I'm hearing from you. And therefore, if you can, if everyone can see the information live, including the clients as well, then the thing should just be faster, which brings me, I guess, to, two things that we know aren't there, which is the stuff you need to feed into the hopper and the time it's fed into the hopper, which is the information itself. So what information are we lacking in digital form? Is that a big barrier to adoption and use of PropTech? And how do you make people, what investments needed to be made by whom in that data, making it digital? And also, how do you make people use it? How do you make people bring that information to the front of the transaction so everyone has that shared picture from the get-go?
Good question. I think if I could answer all of that, we probably wouldn't need to have the DPMSG. So I'm not sure I can answer all of that myself. I'm probably not as qualified as some of the other industry sort of representatives that are involved in the property chain and the process on a more sort of day-to-day basis than I am. But I think if we look at this from, more broadly, the PropTech adoption, I think there needs to be more education in terms of what tech can do, particularly in this part of the process. I think, as I mentioned, in the commercial world, you have people responsible for innovation that are looking at this. They're employed to look at what PropTech solutions are out there and to create a proper strategy around it. I think that's probably lacking in this part of the industry. And I think that, there are obviously companies that can provide consultancy services, which I think is really helpful. But I think they need to engage more in the conversation around technology and start to really kind of see where the value is. And I think also consumers can help drive this as well. I think that's something that some of the PropTech companies in this space have actually changed their business models and changed their strategies and started engaging more with the consumer, who is then driving those involved in the buying and selling process from an industry professional perspective to use the technology. So we've seen that across the property industry, that changing consumer expectations has driven technology adoption. As soon as you start to see actually as soon as there's a bit of a power shift, we've seen that in the office space. People are no longer coming into the office 5 days a week, and so the power has shifted somewhat, And now technology is looked at as a way to engage people in the office, to create a better experience for them, to make decisions on how the space is utilised. And that's in response to the way in which consumers are operating in a different way. And so I think that we should look at that, trying to encourage consumers to be involved and to engage with the agent or the conveyancer and
That's a
influence them.
really powerful point, because it's interesting how when I asked you, where's the value in PropTech, you turn to your own personal experience to explain the value rather than describing the technology itself. So, and that frequently happens. When anyone says, can it be done better? People turn to their own personal experience of what being in the property market feels like, and say, well, yes, because that wasn't, that was not great. So I think, that there's a question then of how do you get consumers to exercise their power, because in the home buying and selling process, less so in commercial property, because commercial property are frequent flyers that you as a business you're a regular user of the market and the services in the market, but as a home buyer you're not, are you? So but do you think people's just expectation that they should be able to do things quickly and on their phone and without having to print stuff off and go into banks and sign things, do you think they're just going to frown upon old-fashioned ways of dealing and just vote with their feet and just go towards those who are technologically enabled?
Yeah, I think if they're aware that there is other companies that are doing it differently and their experience will be much better as a result of that, then suddenly the power shifts, doesn't it? So, if I am selling my flat and I am approached by, or I'm aware of, an agent that says to me, well, I can sell this property in 4 weeks, why would I not go for them? I would probably choose to go with a company who says that to me and has proven that is, the case, and that they can do it, versus an agent that puts it on the market and then it could take 3 to 4 months, particularly if I have a real need to move quickly, So I think it's about actually appealing to the needs of the consumer and giving them that choice. Suddenly the power then shifts. We've seen that in the banking world. You have to have some companies that are disrupting the way that the industry is doing things and changing processes. And I think we're now starting to see that in this particular part of the industry. We are starting to see companies that can actually do the whole transaction using technology. So it's whether, if agents and conveyancers want to stay relevant, then they need to start being technology enabled. Otherwise, those that will come in and win that business from them.
So finally, the Land Registry and Ordnance Survey, your old organisation, together they support Geovation, which is a starter, a hub for PropTech businesses. I presume you think that's a good idea, but what else can Land Registry and other public sector bodies do to support the healthy acceleration and innovation and usefulness of PropTech?
Yeah, no, I think what Geovation is doing is great. I mean, I've seen quite a few of our members come out of that accelerator program that Geovation offer, and then go on to other incubators and get investment from the likes of Pi Labs and Reach UK and others. So, it seems like it's a really good sort of starting place for startups that are using Land Registry and OS data in their PropTech solutions. And what I think has worked really well there is the fact that they can get access to the data quite quickly under different arrangements than what they would have to go through if they went direct. So they can play around with it and they can trial it. And I think we need to be doing more of that. We need to create more opportunities to test new prop tech ideas or to test out innovation. So create that environment that can help with that research and development, with as many sort of, eradicating any barriers to doing that as much as possible.
Thank you. Sammy, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to working with you in the steering group. It's fantastic to have you and the Department for Levelling Up as our new members. I think we've got about 14 members now. Thank you for listening. Please do all that like and subscribe things that make sure that you can hear the next episode. We've got 3 episodes already published as well, and we have quite a long list now of others who we are going to interview from across the property sector. So thank you very much, Sammy, and we'll see you all on the next episode.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
This is Property with a View, available on all the usual platforms. Please do leave a review and a rating.